Okay, good morning. Today's share is sponsored L'Zeicha Nishmas Baruch ben Mordechai, Holocaust survivor from the town of Tzanz, whose yard site it is on Lag Baimer. As follows: the etymology of last names is a very interesting sugya. A lot of last names come from very strange stories, very strange places. Last names is not something everybody was born with. It's something that that develops in an interesting way. Now today there's a Sephardi last name called Sutton. I don't think there's any Ashkenazim with the last name Sutton anymore. But it seems there was a family in Prague, like 500 years ago, whose last name was Sutton also. And the way they got that name was an interesting story. The Rosh Mishpach of that family was someone by the name of Reb Shmuel Sutton. And he was a shtadlin. He was a person who was able to talk to the government and try to help out people in a tight spot. They came to pass that there was a gzeira in the city of Prague, that the Jews, like a gzeira against the Jews. And this person, Reb Shmuel, was the one who was chosen to represent the Jews in front of the king, whoever it might have been. And he goes to the king, and the king, so as to hamstring him and not allow him the ability to even help the Jews, the king tells him, I allow you to say 4 words in defense of the Jews. Anything more than 4 words, you're not allowed to say. So Shmuel Sutton, his name wasn't Sutton yet. Shmuel thinks of something, and he says, he looks the king dead in the eye, and he says, Vayomer Hashem ala Satan. And the king, or some of his members of his court had rudimentary knowledge of Hebrew, and they knew Satan was not a good word. And the king demands to know, what type of slur or curse did you just say in my direction? And Shmuel says, not to say anything. What did you say? Not to say it. Okay, you know what? Hutter Ritzui, you could talk. You could talk freely. Speak freely, Shmuel. Tell me what you said. And he says as follows. He says the pasuk in Zechariah is telling a story. Zechariah is the final chapter of Nevuah in Klal Yisrael. Zechariah is from the last group of Nevi'im, the last cohort of Nevi'im. Zechariah Malachai. Zechariah is the one who dies last. Zechariah is the end, the chesima of Nevuah. And in Zechariah's Nevuah, it's kind of like a promissory note, a love letter that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling Klal Yisrael that La'asid Laveh, I'm going to take care of you, I'm going to give you back everything that you missed, I'm going to build up Yerushalayim again, I'm going to take revenge from your enemies. And then in Parak Gimel, Zechariah witnesses like a court case between Yeshua Kain HaGadol and the Satan Kaviyachol in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it says that Yeshua is on trial, and the Satan is aimed to say his piece. And it says, Vayomer Hashem ala Satan. The pasuk starts. It says, Hashem said to the Satan, Yigar b'cha Satan, Hashem b'Satan. The Hashem says that Hashem should quiet down the Satan, should quiet the Satan from speaking. And Yigar b'cha b'oicha b'Yerushalayim. That's what the pasuk says. So he explained to the king, he says, if Hashem, who's Hashem, still took the time and says, Vayomer Hashem ala Satan, Hashem spoke to the Satan with some sort of deference and he gave him some sort of maimed before he says Yigar b'cha Hashem ala Satan, before he shuts him down. So I was hoping that you too, King, we'll take Rudolph, because why not you too, King Rudolph, would deign to speak to a lowly Jew like me, like Shmuel. I was hoping you would learn from God and say, even though I'm nothing more than the Satan, and I'm just, bringing Jews' causes in front of you, Vayomer Hashem ala Satan, you'd still be willing to talk to me. And the king was flattered by this, turn of events, by this turn of the pasuk. And the king said, okay, no problem, I'm going to listen to you. And he let the Jews go. And for years after that, Shmuel was referred to as Shmuel Satan. His last name, his nickname became Shmuel Satan. Like his moment of brilliance that he thought to use that pasuk in Zechariah as a defense for Klal Yisrael, so he became known as Shmuel Satan. Now, the reason I share this story is because this pasuk of Vayomer Hashem ala Satan, Yigar b'cha Hashem ala Satan, is a very interesting Kabbalistic nekuda, meaning as follows: we don't want to shtel to the Satan, right? The Satan is Hu Satan or Yitzharu Malach HaMavis. We don't want to shtel to the Satan. We want to beat the Satan. But L'maisa, the Satan has powers. HaKadosh Baruch Hu imbued the Satan with powers and gave him an ability to create harayin and to do things. So how you deal with the Satan? Do you go aggressively and say, Satan, I'll kill you, I'll smash you, I won't pay attention to you? Or is that like almost inviting the Satan to pay special attention to you? Meaning is by challenging the Satan, is that like an invitation for the Satan to pay special attention to you? Now this is a thing that comes up in many different places, like very, very random spots. For example, there's a machlokes amongst the Mekubalim, if you're supposed to sing the song of B'nai Heichala that the Arizal was made up for Shal Shuddis in Chutz La'aretz. In the Nusach of B'nai Heichala, it challenges the Satan, and in Chutz La'aretz, where the Satan is more powerful, where the Klippas are more powerful, maybe you shouldn't challenge the Satan so directly. For example, Chassidim don't say Tachnun by Mincha. when they daven after Shkia, because after Shkia is man the Klippas are shaylit, and if you challenge the Klippas and the Satan at a time when the Klippas are shaylit, you're asking for trouble. Don't challenge the Satan. We don't say Yigam Chal Satan. The Gemara, where we know this from is the Gemara in Kedushin. The Gemara in Kedushin, Daf Pei Aleph and Aleph, the Gemara brings a story with Plima, I think. The Gemara says, Plima have a ragul amemer kol yema gira be'ena de Satan. Plima daily used to say, gira be'ena de Satan, like an arrow in the eye of the Satan. You know, I'm not afraid of the Satan. So it says, Yom Echad, one day, Mal Yom Kippur have, it was Erev Yom Kippur, Idmulei Ka'anya. The Satan appeared in the form, in the presentation of an ani. Asa Kara Bava, he knocked on his door, Afikul de Rifta. So Plima brought him out some bread to eat. Amalei, he told him, Yomaki, Idna, they like today, Erev Yom Kippur, Kuli Alma Gavoy, everybody's inside. Ba'anoa Baroi, I'm going to have to sit outside. So Aile, he brought him in. Then Amalei, he Idna Kuli Alma, he pushes him, until finally he does something extremely nauseating, and Plima loses his patience and he yells at him. He says, what are you doing here at my table? And then the Satan pretends to die from the shame or from this encounter. The Satan pretends to die. Now Plima, being afraid of danger, the Satan also projects a voice saying that Plima killed somebody. So Plima goes running, he hides in the bathroom, and eventually the Satan appears to him, and the Satan says, why are you challenging me? Well, why are you chapping me like this? So this is the Gemara that teaches us that challenging the Satan in a direct way could be risky. Even if you want to challenge something, don't challenge something directly, face to face. A face-up matchup with the Satan is difficult to do. Now, probably the most maybe the most famous of these of not challenging the Satan that's relevant is about shaving, and I'll show you where. It's about shaving for Api Kabbalah, and I'll show you where. The Chassam Sofer, in his tshuva, in Arachaim, in Simikufn and Tes, the Chassam Sofer is responding to someone who was writing about a hatter. The Chassam Sofer gave a hatter to shave. A Baal Bris could shave even during Sfira. That was the hatter the Chassam Sofer gave. And now, 2-3 tshuvas back and forth, where somebody is very strongly bothered by the Chassam Sofer's hatter, and he's writing back strongly. Now, Teichad Dvarim, he writes that shaving Bechlal, even with a Misparayim Keintari, even in a way where it's not with a razor, is not allowed and it's unacceptable. So to which the Chassam Sofer writes, and he starts as follows. He says, if you're going to tell me that it's because it's Gayish, he says, I don't know who told you that it was ever Gayish. Gayim didn't shave, everybody did or didn't shave. Some cultures shave, some cultures didn't shave. It's not Gayish, he says. Then he says like this. Chassam Sofer says, Umasha Ramaz, this li Ramaz to me, L'Sifrei Mekubalim, from the Svarim of the Mekubalim, Shekasvu Shalei Lahoshit Yadayim B'dik Niklal. And in the Sifrei Mekubalim it writes that you're not supposed to even put your hands to your beard. Ein liyesik ben astaris. The Chassam Sofer says, I don't know Kabbalah. Okay, or Sheken or Shalav. The Chassam Sofer says he doesn't know. Av mehem ma'amoyim hutra v'tzua legamri b'chol artis Italia. But I do know that it wasn't accepted. In all of Artis Italia and all of Italy, which was full of Mekubalim back in the day, Shekol Chachameh Megulach Zaken v'nitlim be'ilan gadol Menachem Azariah ba'alasar ma'amaris. And they're all being toila in the legacy of the Ramami Fanu, or Menachem Azariah Fanu, who allowed them to, and he was Aviyah Mekubalim, the father of all Mekubalim, Shuhoy Megolach Bali Hishir Saira Achas. He was shaved without leaving over a single hair, says the Chassam Sofer. V'chein Heyed Elav Yashar Mikanadya, Rabbi Yosef Shlomo Del Medego, who was made it to the Polish world, was made about the Ramami Fano this way. V'hayomer she'alpi Chachmei Mekubalim ein chutz la'aretz ru'uy lekach. Now this is the line that's important to us, that has to do with Yigar B'Satan. He used to say, Yashari Mikanadi used to rationalize and say the reason why the Mekubalim in Italy all shave is because this hanhaga of not shaving the beard based on Kabbalah is not roy to adhere to in Chutz La'aretz. The Chassam Sofer continues, and he writes about how this minhag caught on in Poland, in Litva, and etc., and he says this is the minhag. Now, what the Chassam Sofer is referring to is a fascinating machlokes between the Be'er Eshik and the Divrei Yosef. Now, we quoted the Divrei Yosef last week of Yosef Irgas in regards to the fight with the Turkish merchants, where they wanted to box out other merchants. We spoke about that, but that was like a community disagreement. Now the Divrei Yosef has a angry tshuva against this Bereshik, and let me just first let's read the Bereshik a little bit, and then we'll get to the Divrei Yosef. Now, you know what? Hang on one second. Before we go to this cheshbon of not shaving Api Kabbalah, I do want to share that earlier Mekubalim, i.e. Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, which is before the Zayir was available. No one had the Zayir when Yehuda HaChassid was alive. So it's a different type of Kabbalah. It's not Arizal based. It's not Zayar based. It's a whole different type of Kabbalah. But Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid is quoted in the Sefer Yayin HaMeshomar. Now Yayin HaMeshomar is a Sefer from Rabbi Nassim, not the Rav Nassim not the Shapira, not the Megal Amukas, a cousin of the Megal Amukas. Rav Nassim not the Shapira, who was born in Krakow. He's ends up moving to Yerushalayim. He becomes a shadar, like a tzedakah collector for Yerushalayim. He travels the world. He goes to Italy extensively. He meets many gedolim. He writes fascinating svarim after his travels, and one of his svarim is called Yayin HaMeshomer, which is basically to give musar to the Italian tzibur. After spending some time in Italy, he felt that they were nichshel in drinking yayin stam yainam, like they drank wine with their Goyish neighbors, and they were nichshel in shaving. And he wrote a sefer in Yayin HaMeshomer. He goes after them on these two things. Now, a lot of the Marmakaimis of the Kabbalistic reasons not to shave come, the first place is from the sefer Yayin HaMeshomer. Now, Rav Nassim was a very prominent Mekubal. He was a Talmud of Rav Yaakov Sorek, who was a Talmud of the Rav Chaim Vital. He knew the Kisvei Arizal very, very thoroughly. He helped publish some of them in Europe. He knew his word has a lot of weight in what the Mekubalim would hold about something. So now in Yayin HaMeshomer, he brings a story as follows. He brings a story that he found in a Ksav Yad from a son of Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid who wrote a story about his father. And he says as follows: there was an Asher Echad B'Shparya, he says. There was a rich man in Spires, which was the city that Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid operated in. And there was an Asher Echad B'Shparya who used to shave his beard. Now, the Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid is mashma. He used to shave his beard with a misparayim kein tar, not with a razor. He would do it with a trimmer, with the scissors, a way that's even mutar lahalacha. And he says, my father, Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, used to mun him always and say, you can't do that, you have to stop doing that, it's not allowed. And this Ashir Echad inspires would ignore him. He machtavek, he said, please, I'm not doing it with a razor, it's fine. And my father warned him constantly. He says, my father, Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, told him, if you don't cease and desist from shaving your beard with misparayim kein tar, I'm telling you, when you die, it's going to be for you shreklich. You're not going to know, it's going to be terrible. This guy ignored him. He went on about his life. Eventually, this guy dies. Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid is still alive. Now, Rav Zev Wolf Chassid, Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid's son, says, in order to prove his point, my father, Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid, summoned this Gvir's Neshama back down to the shul in front of everybody, and he said, Gvir Ploini, come back down here. Let's see who was right about what I told you about not to shave your beard. He says he summoned the Chassid down, and this Asher started describing for the tzibur in great detail the Yisurim that they're putting him through. He says, right when I got there, they made me, I can read you some of the descriptions from the Yain HaMeshomer. He writes, when my neshama left, Bam Malach, Chavala, a big angry bull came, a malach that looked like a big angry bull came, Vehevi Kliachad Male, Zefes Gafres Melech. He brought like a big barrel full of tar and salt. The Kibel Nishmasi, he accepted my neshama, he trapped it in this barrel of Gafres V'Melach, which is, Stein reminiscent. He trapped it in this barrel. My neshama was now entrusted to this malach chavala, this dangerous malach, and I was not able to move anymore. He passed it on to the next malach, im nishmasi b'seicha. The helo isi l'fnei bezdin agadol shel yoytzer nishmasi. V'az yatzis a baskel l'fnei bezdin v'amar li karisa v'shanisa. A baskel calls out and it says, did you learn anything? You know anything? And Amarti like karisa v'shanisa. Yeah, I was learned. I learned. I studied. I chazered. Miyad siva lahavid li chumash. They brought me a chumash, and the page they open up. V'amar li krab v'amar kara b'miyad. Read right away from where it opens to. Umiyad kishapasachti asef mitzasi kasav. It opened up to the pasuk that says, "V'leisashnis pasuk onecha." You shouldn't destroy your beard. He says. I stumbled. I stuttered. I didn't know how to read this word for them. Miyad shamati kol achar shumachriz tnu nishmasi laviya b'madrega tachteni shel gehenim. Take his neshama, bring it to the lowest rungs of Gehenim. Yatz the baskel v'amar hamtinuli. This whole conversation, it continues. But Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid wanted ostensibly his tzibur to hear this, frightening reality that can happen to someone who shaves when they're not supposed to. Now, there's a bit of a dispute if what the nusach in the story is. Some say the nusach was that he was shaving with a tar, with a razor, in which case it has nothing to do with our discussion of today. Others say the Yain HaMeshomer learns that he was shaving with a misparayim kein tar. I share this only because this is like an early source that predates, the Kisvei Arizal, that predates even the Zayar, that's normally used to bring rayas not to shave, that talks about not shaving from a Kabbalistic, point perspective. Now, the primary place where it comes from, let's go to Tzad Heter first. The Tzad Heter, to disregard the Kabbalistic Zachan and say that it's okay to shave with a misparayim, to shave with a trimmer, comes from the Bereshik. The Bereshik has a famous tshuva. The Bereshik was a Talmud of a son-in-law of the Ramami Fanu. The Ramami Fanu was like some Sefer says, was the Aviyah Mekubalim. He was the Aviyah Mekubalim in Italy in his Tkufa. The Bereshik was a Talmud of an Eidim, or a Talmud of a grand Eidim, maybe a Talmud of a grand Eidim. And in it, the Bereshik has a tshuva where someone's writing to him. They want to know, what's with trimming in Kabbalah? What does the Kabbalah hold about trimming with a Misraim Kain Tar? Now the Bereshik writes, he goes through the Idra, which we'll go through in a minute, where it seems to say that the beard is representative of the Yud Gimel Midas. There's Yud Gimel Ikrin, like in the Dyukyan, in the beard area of a face, is represents the Yud Gimel Ikrim, and when all Yud Gimel Ikrim are together, it's Chesed, which is Yisoid, and you don't want to touch it. There's an Idra that seems to say that. So he first brings and says that there's other ways to learn it, and it could be it only means when you're shaving with a tar, not when you're shaving with Misraim Kain Tar. He brings from the Maver Yabuk, which is another great Italian Rav, a way to be matchet. And then he brings as follows, his Ma'aser Rav, and this is the most important part. He says, Va'ano nafshi. He says, me myself, the Rashti v'chakarti heitev hadik. He'ach hinig Ramami Fano's atzal. I went to do research to find out what was the Ramami Fano's personal practice in regards to the Shaila. The Yadati al Anachin ki kol Erev Shabbos, every single Erev Shabbos, ha'yichayev reishe, the karachav reishe, he would shampoo his head because he had some sort of itchy scalp or whatever. So even though it wasn't common to shampoo your head every single week, 500 years ago, the Ramami Fano was makbet to shampoo his head every Friday. U'mistaper b'diknei k'minig Italian. He would also shave his beard like was the minig of Italians at that time. Who more so than the Ramami Fano was eating fatty meat on a silver tray? Meaning, don't tell me the Ramami Fano doesn't know Kabbalah, he's saying. The Ramami Fano is eating like a king. He knows Kabbalah like a king. He's fully in control of the sugya. And if he did this, the Savar V'Kavol V'Radel Piv Yaris V'Ashari, he accepted and ate and drank from the wellsprings of the Arizal's Torah, Shanim Ravas M'Bi Rabbi Yaakov Saruk, which is incidentally the same Rebbe of Rabbi Nassan Nata, where the Kabbalah that's coming down, this big dispute in Kabbalah, is coming through the same person. Rabbi Yaakov Saruk was a Talmud of Rav Chaim Vital, was a Talmud of the Arizal. And he says he learned from him for many years. Ashabala Midrasha Shel Ramah. He came to the Ramami Fano's Beis Medrash Mitam Ari Rabbi. V'chein Noag at Seif Yama V'chol Tamidav Achar of Navi. And this is what the Ramami Fano was noeg all of his days and all of his Talmidim after him. And he says, how do I know this? Ki Moiri Harav, my Rebbe, Chasnei V'nichler. Okay, so it was an Einichel. Was a son-in-law of a son. My Rebbe was a grandson. The Talmidei Haya. V'chein Harav Ma'bal Ma'avar Yabuk, we quoted earlier. He also learned by him. So he says, Amarti. Therefore, I said, if someone chooses to separate himself from something that's allowed because he wants to be a parush, okay, amazing, a great thing to do. As long as you don't say that everyone has to do it, this is the tshuva from the Bereshik. Now, this tshuva from the Bereshik lays the groundwork for being mekel, even according to the Mekubalim. Meaning, even though the idra from the Ariz and the way it's brought down, b'shem the Mechir Yayin, what's his name? I'm blanking on his name now, is brought down to learn the idra that you're not allowed to shave, you're not allowed to cut it off at all, and that was the Arizal's personal minig. Still, you have the Bereshik that brings that the Ramami Fanu, based on his Rebbe and his understanding of Kabbalah, held that it wasn't essential to be machmer on this, and he was mekel. Now, some safeguard that it seems, and I'll read you from Divrei Yosef, who takes this goes very, very harsh against this. Some safe it seems that the Bereshik was probably making a mistake, because there is a picture, a sketch, an etch of the Ramami Fanu that was available hundreds of years ago, meaning was available already in the 1700s, that seems to show him with a nice beard, a nice round beard that he had. There's a picture, and it seems that the Yasharmi Kanadia, Shlomo Yosef Dalmadego, that the Chossefer is quoting, who ostensibly says that the Ramami Fanu didn't have a beard, was referring to himself, and the Yasharmi Kanadia did not have a beard. And later, Achronim point this out, that it seems to be like a mistake, meaning factually it seems to be a mistake. Even like the Minchas Elazar, for example, who speaks only with the most Aracharetz, the Chosam Sofer writes that the factually the Chosam Sofer was relying on something that wasn't true. It's a mistake, and really, there's no such thing. But the Divrei Yosef attacks this position of the Bereshik strongly. Divrei Yosef says as follows. He says, you're asking me not a halacha shayla, he says. Zet Shuvasi, he says, Mevoruhu, ki gam hashayil v'gam hameshiv, shneim nischavnu levar din zeh, fi meseres hamakuba ben yichidei skula. You're not asking me a halacha question. Last week we spoke about halacha, and according to halacha, it's pretty simple, pretty clear that according to Rav Yishainim, there's a lot of makom to be makel to shave with a Misbrayim Kain Tar. He says, the Rebbe says, you're not asking me a halacha question. You're asking me a Kabbalah question, says the Rebbe. He says, as follows, l'fikach tzarachani lahashiv l'cha l'fi derech zeh. So I have to adhere to that derech, to the derech of Kabbalah, and I'm going to answer you within the world of Kabbalah, he says. Now the Divrei Yosef, as if to resolve one of the earliest problems of it, the Divrei Yosef says I vestim a fragin that if it's first in the Gemara that it's mutter. The Mishnah in Makkah says Ein chayev until you do it with a tara. So it's kilo open and shut. It's first and then. So who really cares if the Kabbalah says it's aser? The halach is like the Gemara. The Gemara says it's mutter. So the Rebbe Yosef takes that right away, and he says there's no stiris. He says as follows. This that the Mekubalim are talking, he says, is inyan hu sheyesh bepirush mitzvahs ater nigla v'nister. This is what today we would understand as a basic thing, but back then when understanding how to integrate Kabbalah into halacha was a very modern sugya. It wasn't something that was so understood. This is like a very important premise. He says, you have to understand, he says, mitzvahs ater are given in two ways, nigla and nister. Ha-nigla hu mashabah b'talmud b'paiskim. That's what's given over in the Talmud and the Paiskim. Shakol chayavim l'kaimi. That's the basic basis. Every single individual in Klal Yisrael has to be mekayim that. V'udavar shav l'chol nefesh. Nister, he says, Mashabah Zayir, Bashar Sifrei Mekubalim. That's what's brought down in the Zayir and the other Sifrei Mekubalim. B'chelik Zeshel Nister, when it's Stavu Ela Yechidim. It's not for everybody. Not everybody's mechuyev to adhere to the things that are brought down in Kabbalah. B'chelik Zeshel Nister, Sridim Ha'imdim B'Seid Hashem. Only people who know the Seid Hashem. Amnam Shar Ama Ahu De Iskalia. Kedisa B'Zayir Parashachim. The rest of the nation is not dafka mechuyev to shtal to this. Now the Rebbe Yosef goes on, he brings the sources in Kabbalah, the Idra, the Kisvari, the Arizal's personal minig, that they were makbid to not shave, and held that Al Pi Kabbalah was very serious. And then he says as follows: this that I saw in the Ber Eshik, he says that the Ramami Fano was Mekel. He says as follows. First of all, he's matri. He says, "Me the kamer have a mistaper bedikne, v'loy kamer mistaper dikna. Muchach shloi hiyidu lo Ramami Fano he mistaper calls the kana el mitzasa." He says first of all, the edus that he quotes from his shver, from his rebbe's grandfather, was that he used to shave his beard. Well, in English, I don't think this makes any sense. Mistaper bidikne, he would shave mistaper dikne. It says mistaper bidikne. He would trim in his beard, not trim his beard. Now, in English, that nuance maybe is lost, but one means trimmed his beard, and one means trimmed his beard. So it says it's Yitachem that the Ramami Fanu you heard trimmed his beard, so he wasn't makbid on the Kabbalistic thing about not touching your beard at all, not putting a hand on the beard. That he wasn't makbid on. He didn't have a chassidish beard, a Chabadski beard. He had a nice Bakavadik Rabbanish beard. If you look at the picture, it looks like a very well manicured beard that the Ramami Fano had. It said there's no reason to assume that the Ramami Fano trimmed his beard like shaving in Gansen. Then he says, V'oid Chakarti, he says, I did more research. I asked for Binyamin HaKohen of Reggio, who was very involved in the Ramchal fight, Binyamin HaKohen of Reggio. The Heishiv Livizel Shani, he says, Divri Baal Be'er HaEshik, Ein Roy Lismach Aleim. Don't be Saimach on what the Be'er HaEshik writes. So he takes the full character assassination route and says he made mistakes all over his Tshuva Sefer. So just you can't be saying about what he's saying over here. When I saw an etching, and this is an early Tshuva, this is in the 1700s already, he says, I saw an etching of the Ramami Fano in Mantaba, who bezakin male al kol gudaisav. He has a full beard, in Gansen, ad kam l'shaynei. That's what Rabbi Yamin of Reggio was writing to the Divrei Yosef, to Rabbi Yosef Yergas. So Rabbi Yosef Yergas quotes this and he says, "Male, there's no reason to be Saimach." And he continues, and then he says, this that they made a chilik. Now this is the important part. I didn't read this in the Bereshik, but the Bereshik says, Vestim Efregin, that the pashtus of the Kabbalah, the way Rav Nasanata is interpreting it, sounds like you're not allowed to shave. I'll tell you, that could be, says the Bereshik, that's only in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, a person's allowed to challenge the Satan, so to speak. A person's allowed to say, I'm going to be makbid on certain chumras and certain things that are challenging to the Satan, and I'm going to stick to it. But in Chutzlar, it says the Bereshik, where, the Satan's on firmer ground, and we're on weaker ground, you don't challenge the Satan so directly. So it says the Bereshik, could be that even though the Ramami Fana was a Mekubal, and he knew the Arizal, and he knew the Kisva Arizal, and he knew the Idra, and he knew all the Mekairis that are mashma, that you're not allowed to trim your beard at all, that was only in Eretz Yisrael. But in Chutzlar, it's where you can't challenge the Yitzhahara so much. There he wasn't machmer. And this, some Sefer says, the Bereshik says, this is the presentation. So it comes to the Divrei Yosef, the Yosef Yergas, says, no way. He says this, that he says, that it makes a difference in the Chutzlar, it's in Eretz Yisrael. He says, I would answer him, okay, he brings up Saraya, then he says as follows, this is very sarcastic, he says that the Bereshik wrote in the beginning of his Tshuva, that, he's not such a bucky in Kabbalistic things. So he said it would have been better if he doesn't say Chalukim in Kabbalistic things that he made up on his own, if he's not such a bucky. This is what the Divrei Yosef says. Like, he challenges his credentials to even make such a chilik. And then he continues and he says, also, in any mitzvahs loisaseh, you don't find the chilik between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. He says, if you look in the Torah, the only time you find chilukim between mitzvahs is by mitzvahs asehs. There are all sorts of mitzvahs atluyis ba'aretz that are contingent on Eretz Yisrael, where you could tell me there's a distinction between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. But he said, in mitzvahs loisaseh, there's no distinction between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. Now this is a shtickle shvera tiny to have because, granted, this is not a mitzvah at all. The not shaving, even the Divrei Yosef is maskim that he's answering only based on Kabbalah. He's not attempting to say that this is the pashas of the pasuk. So other later achronim point out that this is a shtickle of this is a funny taina to take, meaning to say that mitzvahs leisa says don't have a chilik in its own chutzlards. Here, this is not either. This is not an asay or a leisa say. So what are you having tainas on the bereshik about? But Yechshiv the Yosef strongly disputes this bereshik's chilik of making a distinction between Eretz Yisrael and Chutzlaretz. It says that Mekubalim held you're not allowed to shave holds true in Eretz Yisrael and Chutzlaretz. It's all the same, and you have to adhere to it. You're not allowed to shave. Now, this obviously did nothing to settle the fight. As we see, the Chassam Sofer brought what he brought, and the Minchas Elazar in a humorous tshuva. Minchas Elazar's tshuvas are always full of like wit and sarcasm and Minchas Elazar's tshuvas are a great read. So the Minchas Elazar Cheli Beis tshuva memches, he has a long tshuva to go through the Inyan where he delicately peels apart things he doesn't like, not so delicately peels apart people he doesn't like. The Minchas Elazar continues. So this did nothing to settle the shaila of what the Mekubalim would hold. L'mashal Rav Yonasan Eibshitz writes in a tshuva that, like the Chassam Sofer, that even though he heard the Mekubalim, but in Liesik, and then there's really makom to be mekel. Now, how to learn this idra is itself like a grace of machlokes. The core makar of where it comes from, the Yinal Shevel Pi Kabbalah, the idra. So Rav Nassan Natter, he learned it that way and said that it means Yinal Shev at all. Others say it only means Yinal allowed to shave in a time when it's aser, meaning the Zayar is giving the context of why shaving is so aser, shaving with a tar, with a razor. And you want to know why Lesigalach passed the kancha? So the Rambam says it's because that's what the Kaimir Avodah Zarah used to do. That's what Avodah Zarah people used to do. The Zayar says the reason why you're not allowed to do it is because you're destroying the Yud Gimel midas that are represented in a person's face and his beard. So, meaning other Gedolei Achronim learned that the Zayar is not being moisif anything that the halacha doesn't already know. The Zayar is just being moisif depth of the Yisr. It's being moisif like a wrinkle in the character of the Yisr, but it's not being moisif anything in the in the Yisr itself. Now, interestingly, I just want to point out that this is all al pi Kabbalah. There is the Tzemach Tzedek, and this, I think probably colors a lot of what a Chabad beard looks like. Tzemach Tzedek has a long tshuva where he tries to bring it back to halacha, away from Kabbalah. Tzemach Tzedek doesn't want to suffice with it being asr al pi Kabbalah. Tzemach Tzedek holds that it's your over mishum leisilbash. A person shaves his beard, he's over mishum leisilbash. Now, some achronim, and I don't want to diminish, meaning the seriousness of the tshuva. The Tzemach Tzedek, it's 10 long pages, and the Minchas Elazar writes about someone who machzavek this tshuva, that he's a fool who doesn't know how to learn, because the Tzemach Tzedek is writing sophisticated tshuva, 10 pages long, so I don't want to go into that basket, chas v'shalom. So the Tzemach Tzedek writes that it's leisilbash. Now, I will say that a lot of achronim point out that women don't even have beards. So it's very odd to say that it's leisilbash to shave something that women don't even have. Meaning you're shaving a beard, it's like almost like going with the Tam Hadvarim, but not going with the Metzias Hadvarim. Like the Metzias Hadvarim is that women don't have beards. You might tell me it's L'damis L'nashim. Fine, that's all true when there is something to do that's L'damis L'nashim. So other Chaynim, don't like this Tzemach Tzedek L'halacha Mamish, but Tzemach Tzedek has a long Marach. And I just wanted to summarize the Southern Lesser. We said last week that Al Pi Halacha Kipshuta, it seems like it's mutter. The Southern Lesser is A Mishum Gzeira, which is how most people interpret the Yehuda Chassid with that story that we started off with. B, I'm sorry, no, that's actually, I take it back, those could be separate. A, there's Gzeira, meaning we don't want Jews to look like Goyim too much. And when the Goyim started doing this way, it became a cultural thing. Tzuras Yisrael, that's probably what the Chazon Ish held, what the Chavetz Chaim held, what many Litvish Gedolim, and why in Bnei Brak, it became less popular to shave, even though in the Elam Yeshivas, before the war, everyone shaved. It's probably because of Tzuras Yisrael, the Gzeira of not looking like Goyim too much. Then there's the Yehuda Chassid, which is a story, a scary, frightening story. Then there's the Isser Mishum Chashash of coming to Tar, which we spoke last week from the Chuvas Hadeshen, that the Ramah partially brings down, that the Bach brings down, the Marshal brings down. There's a Chash. Once you're using an instrument that's very sharp, and again, that's something that becomes relevant to modern day halacha, because modern day trimmers, even if they don't have lift and cut, modern day shavers, sometimes the blades are so sharp that if you ran the blade along your face alone, it would cut also, like a razor. So some places can hold that's problematic, and that becomes, very relevant to today's shavers. That's much more modern. Metzias Shaila, talk to your LOR. Then there's the Gzeir Mishum Avodah Zarah. That's based on the Rambam. And then there's the Gzeir Mishum Yilbash, which is based on the Tzemach Tzedek. And then there's based on the Mechir Yayin, which is purely Kabbalistic. So that's about, 5 or 6 reasons why, even though according to straight up halacha would be mutter, is makom to be machmer not to shave. Now, okay, what do you say?
Leisha doesn't come into this picture.
No, we should get to laser taka. Laser could really be layilbash, and we have to talk about on the face. Well, depends where. Yeah, we should get to that. Now, I just want to say next week I want to continue the shaving thing by talking about when it made it to real Lita, not Lita, to Prague really. When shaving made it to Prague, it became a firestorm of controversy. The Rebbe Yehuda wrote one of his most controversial tshuvas. In all of Sefer Rebbe Yehuda, maybe possibly the most controversial tshuva in the whole Sefer Rebbe Yehuda is about shaving. And Rebbe Yehuda had plenty of time to decide if he wanted to publish it or not. He decided he wanted to. Many Gedolim of the day, real Gedolim, Gedolei Olam, wrote back to him criticizing it, and the Rebbe Yehuda and Chelik Beis has several more tshuvas in defense of this. I want to go into this famous yet controversial psak that the Rebbe Yehuda about shaving. Mitzvah next week.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.